Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens. This is Jake, and I'm solo today, but we do have a guest that needs really no introduction, I think. If you've listened to this show, we've had this brand on a variety of different times, and we're excited to have Master Distiller Brendon Coyle from High West Whiskey joining us today all the way from Utah. And if anyone has listened to this show, you know that this is like my fangirl moment every time we have High West on. So, Brendon, thanks for joining the Bourbon Lens today.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excited to be here with you and talking High West. There's a lot of really cool and exciting things that you all have going on. But I want to start just by getting to know you a little bit more from your background and kind of diving into whiskey, because I think it's always good to peel back around, master distillers. What do they do? How do they get there? And all of those things. So for our listeners, can you just share a little bit how you got into whiskey and how you kind of rose to this, position within High West?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, really just a alcoholic beverage in general. I came to the world through homebrewing, right? I just got way into it, homebrewing in my kitchen in college. Next thing you know, I was spending all my time and free time and free money homebrewing. So I thought, geez, I should probably make a career out of this or something if I'm going to spend all my time doing it. And so I was in the brewing industry for kind of a short, maybe 6-7 years before I went on to do my master's in brewing and distilling sciences at Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh, Scotland. So that's where I did my graduate work. And then coming back from there, I consulted a little bit, worked in the brewing industry a bit when I came back. But ultimately, the original founder of High West found out about me because, the Utah community is a pretty small community across brewing. But he heard about me. We eventually met. And, he was looking for a guy to come in on the technical side as a master distiller. And so it worked out great. I was all about building things from the ground up. I had always been in kind of small, or emerging, small businesses at that point in time. And so it was a great idea. And so that was back in 2007. And so I jumped on as a managing partner and master distiller from day one, and we built it up and had a great time doing it. And, that led to obviously the acquisition by Constellation Brands in 2016, I believe it was. And since then, I've taken kind of a broader role in Constellation across all the spirits sites, but I still remain master distiller, and I still station right out of High West. I office out of the Wanship Distillery, the big production distillery, just outside Park City. So,
yeah. So, you grew up in brewing. What's your favorite type of beer, or does it go with the seasonality of that from your homebrew days to now? Like, is there like a session IPA or a hazy or a stout? Like, what really tickles your fancy?
So it does change with the seasons, but for a long time, I've always said, and I lived in the UK for, over 2 years. So, my favorite beer style, which a lot of people don't even know about over here, is called an English dark mild on cask. So a mild beer, essentially a light mild or a dark mild is a low alcohol. They typically range from 3 to 4.5% or so. They're actually pretty low on the ABV. But on cask, on the beer engine, they're just this lovely, smooth, velvety, toasted ale. That's just something you can sip all day. It's beautiful.
Well, that sounds heavenly. I tell you what, when I went to the UK, I had no clue what I was ordering. I would just order beers that I didn't know what they were, and I would drink it. And it was kind of like there was a lot of brown ales that I ended up just kind of drinking because that's what was popular, I feel like, when I was there. But there was a lot of variety of beer that I didn't even know existed. And, I feel like America has been like the IPA hop craft, movement. And over there, they're more in the ales. And it's just a different style of brewing, it feels like, from one place to the next.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few styles of beer I don't like, but and I'll grab for a hoppy IPA any day of the week. Those are beautiful. I love them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it changes on the season, just based on my whiskeys too, and different spirits I drink.
Yeah.
I'm kind of all over the map on different spirits, and I often reach for stuff that is not a whiskey, especially not an American whiskey, just because I want the ideas to flow. I want that kind of cross-pollination, blending kind of ideas to start flowing.
Yeah. And so I think that's something, we were chatting a little bit before the podcast, this idea of you going over to like Scotland and really understanding whiskey from, they'll argue between them and Ireland who created whiskey first, right? But like different styles of whiskey. And then you come to production in the States, right? Like column, just like shooting whiskey and just mass production. So like, how do you infuse like learning those old technical styles and merging that with the emerging market of American distillation and, continuing to keep up with production, because American whiskey is grown like gangbusters from case volume year over year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kind of a two-part question in a way, but like, on the first side, flavor profiles and where they come from and how we make those things. Most technique or most flavor profiles you have, in these drinks, you can originate them out of a natural part of the process, whether it's like, pushing the wild bacterial activity in your fermenters a little further to get some more acidity, some more funky flavors. It's different types of maturation styles, wood, things like that. You can push a lot of interesting flavor profiles by a lot of natural, procedures and just kind of twisting them in your favor. And so that's what, we've really focused on, what yeast strains you use. There's some amazing yeast strains out there that can give you some really wonderful different ester profiles in the different whiskeys. And so we pushed on that quite a bit at High West. And to the volume perspective, it's no secret now. Everyone knows we love to blend with column still whiskey, sourced pot still whiskey. Most of the pot still whiskey that we use in our blends, we make ourselves. Mm-hmm. We have High West own make pot still whiskey in most of what we do right now. But it's easier to adjust to the volume, the growth side of it, when you're blending across a lot of different platforms, especially using column still whiskey, because that's the big, behemoth that gets produced the most in the US is column still whiskey. And we're fortunate enough to have some good relationships with some phenomenal, column whiskey distillers.
Yeah, I think that's what really is interesting is I feel like you all keep your artisanal craft part, no matter how big High West has gotten. I still think High West is the largest craft distiller because you are focusing on that art of blending in your own make with this idea of partnership, right? To create and craft whiskey that's unique to market. And so as you all go about that from an emerging channel perspective, like how do you continue to stay on that cusp of, craft whiskey and craft distillation and blending as the American craft whiskey boom is here in full effect because it's growing every day?
I still think there's a lot of room to grow with experimentation, innovation, flavor profiles and such. I mean, for 200 plus years, the American whiskey industry was pretty stagnant. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just change came slow to the whiskey industry for good reason. You put something away in barrel, you're not going to know for 4 or 5 years until it works out. And then you add in other, other options such as like, yeast strains, grain types, stuff like that. You're talking about 10, 20-year cycles on R&D. So it's a very slow turn, to make. But of course, the craft distilling boom really pushed that and kicked it into high gear, which is great, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so I still think, we're very early on in the process. I mean, look at American single malt, right?
Yeah.
American single malt has yet to be defined by the federal government. We are so early in the innovation curve still. We're in the first 25%. So we've got a lot of things, a lot of R&D projects that we've got, in fermentation in the warehouse going right now that we've kind of got ideas on for the future. And so there's a lot more to come.
Well, so that's exciting. And so you hit on the American single malt question. So in your Saloon Society, which is your new D2C partnership with consumers in a variety of different states, Kentucky being one of them, I'm lucky enough to be a member because, again, I'm a High West fanboy. The High Country single malt, the new rendition is out in market according to that. And I'm sure it's released in Utah as well. So speaking of that, the TTB literally just came out, they're in their 60-day period. What does that mean for you all as they start to define that American single malt movement and how you all continue to position yourself amongst the variety of great distilling operations that have kind of laid claim to what American single malt will be, that next American spirit?
Yeah, I think there's to me, there's two sides to the coin. I think this is very, very good because I think you need at the very first, moment to lay a foundation for a developing style or whatever it is, you need definition. You have to have some kind of definition around it. There's not currently a definition that exists. So I agree that getting to a definition that we can all shake hands and agree on across the United States, I think that's very important. What I also think is very important is to not make it too restrictive. Regulations, are good and bad, right? It's like, they can restrict growth and innovation, but they can also define it and help it grow. So I think that it's starting to go down the right path now. I like I mostly like the initial definition that the TTB proposed. And I guess we'll have a public comment session on it here for September, and that's good. But I think it's really important. I want to touch on the second point a lot, because I think it's really important that we do not, shackle ourselves too much to how the rest of the world has done single malt.
Mm-hmm.
The United States, across everything, beverages, food, music, culture, we've been great boundary breakers. And I think we still need to remain boundary breakers in this particular instance as well. We need to make the regulation open enough so we can push the boundaries of innovation and not be stifled by the definition. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and that's been one of the things that I think has been really interesting when I've talked to people in the, American Single Malt Commission, right? They're really focused on, it being barley. Well, why couldn't it be, 100% rye or 100% whatever, right? From a malted perspective, as long as it's, follows, it's a single grain malted. I kind of like that open interpretation because it does leave experimentation, and you're not necessarily too Scotchish, right? From what Scotch is. So that was my thing, like early on, like hearing those different opinions, because we talked to a variety of distillers that do 100% X, Y, and Z grain other than barley. And they were just calling it a single malt because there was no definition. It was a single malted product in their bottle. So I'm interested to see how it shapes up, because I think there's a way that we can explore with grains and varietals in a different way, because, America has a lot of that to offer right here across the country from a grain perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see where it leads as well. Having the single malt definition as any grain, that would be interesting. That's a pretty broad definition right there, as long as it's malted. But yeah, I am excited to see where it goes. I think what will also be really cool is to see the regional variants, right?
Yeah.
I hope that we do. Just like in Scotland, they have regional definitions. I hope that we have different kind of regional flavor profiles that emerge, and I think that could really help certain non-distillery locations kind of get on the map, so to speak, by having these kind of regional flavor profiles come about and evolve over time.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And you talked about innovation. I feel like American Single Malt was something we as a podcast jumped on pretty early, because we thought it to be a growing industry, and it really has. It's kind of grown, and I feel like it's the perfect bridge from a bourbon drinker or from a Scotch drinker to coming into American whiskey. It's a really nice play, and then maybe getting into bourbon or rye, and vice versa. Like if you're a bourbon drinker getting into American Single Malt, and then maybe trying Scotch or Irish whiskey for that matter, or Japanese, or like there's a variety of other things that will get you to the rest of the world whiskeys one way or the other. So I think American Single Malt is something to continue to be on the lookout for everyone. And you all have your all's high country American Single Malt. So can we just talk a little bit about like what's different with this edition versus the previous?
Yeah, sure. And we're just actually pulling samples right now out of the warehouse to start the blending process for this next year's release, which will be in December. So it's kind of a great time. We're looking at those samples here in a couple of weeks. So specifically speaking, we had 3 releases. First and second release, first and second years were local only. They were distillery only. Third release, which was last year, was the first time we got it out nationwide, which is pretty cool. Still small production, but we got it nationwide, which is pretty awesome. And what we did, the first couple of iterations, we actually had a little bit of a peated component to it. I hesitate to say like it was a peated whiskey because it was very subtle, very, very low peat. It was also, the phenolics were really only just meant to give kind of like round out the definition, increase the complexity, that kind of thing. It wasn't like really heavily peat. I barely even lightly peated. We opted to not do that on the third nationwide release. So, and that was a conscious decision to just, I guess, kind of bring more people into the category and kind of, appeal to more palates. But really what we did is we focused on, the other similarities to the first 2 releases were new and used casks, 3 different mash bills. And we also had some sherry cask in there as well for the first nationwide release. So there's a lot of different things in there. I mean, we had everything from, was it 4-year-old up to, actually, I think we had some stuff below 4-year-old, under 4-year-old, all the way up to 10-year-old in that blend. So quite a wide spread across mash bills and across ages. Pretty much wholly, 53-gallon and above casks, but we still have a few small casks that we're working through that we did very early on in the company. Nice way to push, wood resin and tannins in a blend. So that's pretty cool. But, we won't have many more of those in the coming years, I don't think. So yeah, pretty complex. For the mash bills, we have a very traditional kind of we don't do 6-row barley, six-row malt at High West. We do 2-row. So very traditional, kind of straight 2-year, 100% 2-year, or 2-row malted barley. We also have what we call a tri malt, which is kind of interesting. Yep, and that's the essentially 2 different types of brewers malts, and then 2-row as well.
Yeah.
And then we have the peated malt.
Okay.
Which, like I said, we scaled that back for this first release, or this first national release.
The one thing that I noticed on this one versus the previous one that I've had, it's got more like an almond note to it and a little bit of like darker bitter chocolate. So it's like if Almond Joy was like a dark chocolate note, like that's kind of what I'm getting. Like there's a little hint of coconut in there, to be honest. I feel like this one is more rich. I think the other ones, and I forgot about it, having just a little bit of peat component, just talking with Isaac, who's, your blending and distilling manager there at High West previously. Like I feel like that one was more bright. This one has a little more darker components, maybe because it's got some older stock in it, but like I feel like it's got a little more rich and depth complexity to it. So I'm excited to come back to this over time, because I think as a little aeration gets into it, it's going to have, or oxidation, it's going to have a little bit of change to the bottle, because I just opened it today before the podcast. But I really like the profile on this for like an everyday sipper type of whiskey.
Yeah, we did. So obviously, we were a year later, so we did have one older year stocks in there. So the weighted average age did go up a little bit for that next blend. We also tweak that sometimes with the pushing that brewer's malted barley recipe. The mash bill that we use, some interesting brewer's malts, has C60, caramel 60 in it. So it's a crystallized malt.
Yeah.
And then it also has some chocolate roast malt in there too, which is basically just like a burnt malt. It's like a heavily roasted to the point of being basically burnt kind of a malt. We don't use very much of that in the mash bill. It's a very, very small amount. But when we can kind of push that mash bill a little bit more in the blend, we can get some of those kind of darker chocolate kind of roasted elements coming out more. So it's fun to play with.
I think this is really well done. I really was looking forward to open it. Like I said, I love American single malt. I've really started to dive into Scotch myself and Irish, and I think this one is really good. It kind of gives you a little stout cask finish without having stout cask finish in it, right? Like I think the one this kind of reminds me of just a little bit is Westward has a stout finished American single malt, and this kind of reminds me of that profile, which they're doing some amazing things from a single malt perspective, and to get that stout, finish is really interesting and unique without having any finish characteristics on it. Yeah.
Again, having that wide swath, in the inventory allows us to kind of do that. When I talk to, when I do talks and presentations and stuff, I often liken it to, like a painter can typically paint a more beautiful painting if they have more colors in their color wheel, more colors in their palette. Same thing for us, as distillers and blenders in the industry. If we have a wide variety of ages, mash bills, and types in the inventory, we can typically paint a more beautiful picture when it comes to a blend.
Yeah. And I think this is super unique, and I really am enjoying that. And I'll probably have to go back to that for an evening cocktail, evening pour tonight, because I think this bottle won't last very long. After you open it, and then you're like, oh, hey, I like this. And then you got to share it with a friend or two. And then, by the time you do that, you have a campfire and it's gone.
Yeah.
And speaking of campfires, a little birdie told me that you all are bringing back one of your beloved products from a national perspective. And that is High West Campfire. A lot of people may not be familiar with that. They may be more familiar with what used to be American Prairie Bourbon, which is just now, what's the new branded name?
That's replacing American Prairie Bourbon?
Yeah.
It's just High West.
Yeah, High West Bourbon. And then you have the Double Rye and the Rendezvous Rye are probably the names that most people are like constant with. And then obviously Midwinter's Night Dram, is the polarizing one that a lot of people hunt after. But Campfire is that unique profile of whiskey that has campfire element to it. So talk a little bit about bringing that product back to market after, being a Utah only release last year.
So to reel it back a little bit further, so we did a little bit of culling, let's just say, of our products on a national scale, and that was in an effort to kind of simplify a little bit. We were doing a lot of stuff, and you talked about Yippee-Ki-Yay earlier when we were talking, and that's another one that we pulled back and discontinued because we were trying to simplify the portfolio a little bit because we were getting a little too busy. Let's just call it in the facility. So Campfire was one of those that we pulled back from the national scene. The market quickly told us that's a bad decision, and we listened. And so Campfire is coming back on the national scene. It is the first ever, and we believe still to this date the only blend of American bourbon, American rye, and peated Scotch whiskey. So it's a three-way blend. The way this all kind of started in the beginning was we were looking for the perfect campfire whiskey. We're in Utah. We have mountains all around us. We go camping a lot. And when you go camping, you really typically only bring one whiskey, not like your whole whiskey cabinet, because right, you're going out in the backwoods. And so the discussion is what whiskey you're bringing. And you bring in a rye, bourbon, you bring in a peated Scotch, you bring in Japanese whiskey. What are you going to bring? And so we wanted to do this kind of worldly blend, right? That goes across multiple avenues and has the sweetness of the bourbon, the spiciness of the rye, and the peated smokiness of the Scotch whiskey, a peated Scotch whiskey. And so that's kind of how the blend came about. And it took a long time on the blending table to get it right, because as you can probably imagine, the peated component is a very volatile component. It can quickly overshadow the blend, and actually on the reverse of that, it can quickly disappear too, which was kind of surprising to us. So in the end, we were literally tweaking that peated component 0.5 to 0.25%, and it was making all the difference in the world on the blend. And so that was really So it took a while to get right, but we're thrilled to have it back. We're bringing it back, and at the same time going into a partnership with the Wildland Firefighters Association of America, doing a dinner actually next week for it, because technically this all kind of hits the market Monday of next week, I believe. And we're going to be donating funds from Campfire to the American Wildland Firefighters Association. Tagline is, don't light a campfire, drink one with us.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Campfire is probably one of the more polarizing whiskeys I drank like early on. And I was not necessarily a whiskey connoisseur at that point, and I hadn't tried anything from that peated Scotch region in my life prior to Campfire. And so for me, it was one of those things that I had to go back, 2 years after I opened it to be like, I can appreciate this now, because it has that component to it that if you're not aware of it, or if you want to drink something after it, it's kind of like you just need to pick Campfire and drink Campfire. My opinion. But I think it, that whiskey has matured over time as it sat in the bottle, but also my palate has matured over that time. So if you're into peatiness, I think it's there. It's not like over peated by any means. I think it's just a really good opportunity for people to be introduced to, those types of scotches around the world that are peated, and that can bring some of that earthiness to it.
I can't tell you how many staunch Scotch drinkers that I've kind of converted to at least considering American whiskey with that blend, and how many staunch bourbon drinkers that I've kind of got to consider peated Scotch whiskey, or just Scotch whiskey in general. I say we're building bridges across the Atlantic with that blend, right? It's bringing both sides together, and it totally depends on your experience level. I have people come up and tell me that, like, wow, that Campfire is just like, there's a lot of peat in there. That's tough to handle or whatever. And then I've had other people come up to me and say, you know what, I don't really get it. I don't really see any peat in there at all. And so it just totally depends on your experience level with peated whiskeys.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a peat monster by any means, but it does have...
No, not at all.
If you're not used to any peat, it will definitely wake up your palate. I think that's 100%. And since we're on the limited edition train, the other thing that the first one that came out in the Saloon Society was the re-innovation of this year's Rendezvous Rye. And so, last year you all came out with a really colorful bottle and colorful artwork with older stock in it that was your own and really blended too. And now you have this year's rendition. So, and this is the first time I've ever seen Isaac's name on the back of it. So I guess this was more of a collaboration there on this blend. So what did you all do differently as you continue to elevate this one into that premium tier with that Boo Rye and Midwinter's, night dram?
Well, as the distillery gets older and our stocks get of high West own make, off the pot stills that we produce gets broader and kind of deeper in the inventory. We do things to kind of showcase a little more sometimes the high West own make, and that's what we kind of did with the Rendezvous there. There's a little bit higher barrel wood sugar kind of content. There's some kind of heavier richness to it, and it's a little bit more palate full. There's more palate weight to it by pushing on that pot still some more. So yeah, we did a little bit of redefinition and took advantage of the seasonal nature of Rendezvous Rye across all our products. There's certain products that we want to have some pretty fine consistency with, and there's other products that are more seasonal and we want to have more kind of a vintage to them. Rendezvous is one of those products now. Midwinters is no doubt one of those products. And the High Country Single Malt is of course one of those products. And so, it's fun to play and kind of vintage it. So you can go back and then you can do, basically like a vertical tasting, so to speak, across multiple years, which is pretty fun.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. Not too long ago, I just was like, hey, I have a Rendezvous from like 2019, and then I had the 2020, which is like the colorful, like geometric shape looking one. And now this one, honest to God, I think there's some chocolatiness still left on my palate from the High Country Single Malt. So I'm like, there's a little chocolate, but this one's like the citrus characteristic. It's like almost tropical fruit almost that you're getting. It's really fruit forward. And I like the juiciness of it. Like that's what kind of it reminds me of. Like you're biting into like a juicy orange or citrus type fruit that's coming through on the Rendezvous. And it does have that weightiness to it and gets a little bit of that pot still funk, which I love from a rye whiskey. It's not like your traditional, like column still 95.5. It's like got some funkiness to it, which is nice. Even if the mash bill is 95.5, I don't know what it is, but it's
you
fun.
You can drive some great ester profiles off the pot still.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, and I think that's one of the things I like about pot still rye whiskey in general. You can get more of those fruit notes out of a pot still because you're not stripping a lot of those oils like you do. And so like I feel like you're getting a lot more oil content and it's making it richer and creamier from a flavor profile. So it's not as like harsh, like it doesn't get as pine sol-y or foresty as it can get when it's like stripped and it's less oily.
Yeah. And it's column stills are typically set up to do, a few things really well, and you run them all day long, and that's what they do. They focus on, one kind of spectrum of the whiskey, and that could be a wonderful spectrum. It can be a really wonderful spectrum to build, a foundation off of for like a base whiskey. Pot still gives you the whole bouquet, the whole rainbow, right? Yeah. The flavor profiles and aromas and everything. And that's what's really fun about using that kind of that counterbalance of the column to pot still, and you can get to a really good place. That's like I said before, better than the sum of its parts, really.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then I have one more question about innovation, because one of the things I don't think a lot of people know about is your single barrel program. We're Total Wine's lucky enough to have done some picks here locally in Louisville, and they come out in this really nice black bottle. And you all have a variety of random casks that show up. Like I had a Banyuls or Bunyuls, I don't know, some type of French wine, like finished bourbon, and it was phenomenal. Like absolutely loved it. It's like, when you all are doing those types of program and finishing, like, do you consider that part of your innovation, portfolio is that barrel influence? And do you see that as something that, is still considered innovation in today's, whiskey boom? Because there's a lot of finished product on the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still consider it innovation. It's definitely been pressed on much harder over the years for good reason. I mean, you can get to a lot of great places, right? I mean, the Scots kind of started it off with making sherry barrel whiskey famous, and there's a whole lot bigger spectrum out there beyond sherry barrels, and we try to push on that pretty hard. I think that's a component of innovation. I think we're getting past. We're getting kind of saturated to the point now where that's like the only innovation, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's very impactful. You can do a lot of fun things with it. We love to play with it. It's a focus in our Barrel Select program that we have, which our Barrel Select program is changing right now. It'll be kind of morphing into a new program next year. We're taking it and we're kind of splitting it into two programs. the larger program will be termed the small batch series, and then we're still going to have the barrel select program that's going to kind of condense in size. It's going to get smaller, but it's going to get more unique and much more focused on the experience of choosing, the barrel select,
Oh, cool.
and going through that sensorial experience at the distillery with us, tasting through casks, having a great meal with it, enjoying the space for a day and a half, that kind of focused, experience. And then the larger kind of more national, just the larger volume part of the project will be the small batch series. And that'll be still its own unique blend, changing every year. And it'll still be, most of it will be barrel finished, but it's just going to be in a larger size. As opposed to a single barrel focus, it'll be a small batch. So call it maybe 200 barrels at a time, batch size, which is still pretty darn small. But it was a way that we could, kind of grow the program in one way, but also still keep a very high-end kind of single batch program or single barrel program, unique to how we've done it in the past.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. And I like that idea of batched variants, right? So you could come in and you could try the different batches and pick which one you think would be best for your group. I like that idea, because then you're really getting the true artisanal blends that you all are known for in most of your whiskeys. So you're bringing that across the portfolio, which is really nice. And so, like, staying on this topic for innovation, because you talked about we're about 25% into this idea of innovation. One of the things we talked about to start the year off was, what are we going to see more of? We talked about American single malt. We talked about finished. We've talked about, different wood influence, ex-bourbon cask versus new virgin oak, and blending those in and making just more American whiskey. What are some of the things that you think would be that next part of innovation to see, American whiskey kind of, push on?
Yeah, sure. One thing in particular that we've been putting some time towards over the years, and I know that others have too, and you're going to see it come out more and more, is unique grain types, heirloom grains. So instead of bourbon's defined by essentially like a yellow dent number 4, number 5 corn. That's pretty much the standard across the industry. I mean, what about blue corn? What about red corn? Other things like that. You have heirloom varietals of barley that you can take it right down the malted barley train that comes into American single malt. I think you're going to see more unique expressions on the grain type, and I hope what you see beyond that is pulling back on the maturation, pulling back on certain items, so you can really see the grain itself, and it's not just covered up by a whole bunch of wine cask finish, this and that. It'd be great to just really focus on one thing, because there's some wonderful grains that have incredible oil and protein contents to them, that have some beautiful flavors to them, that I hope will play a part in defining it, and I hope that other distilleries really showcase the grain too.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And you talked about maturation. Sometimes the barrel can cover up a lot of the flaws of the whiskey, right? Because you're going to get the sugars and the tannins and the vanillins and all the other things that you're going to get from a barrel. There's this idea of youthful whiskey versus young whiskey, right? Young whiskey, a lot of ethanol and grain forward. Youthful has grain content. You can smell the corn, the rye, whatever, which is the forward grain. But it plays because it's vibrant. You're still getting maybe the early maturation phase that a lot of people don't have an appreciation for. And so I think there's going to be a point in time, especially for smaller distilleries and craft, to play into that youthful category where they're 3.5 years, they're maybe not 4 years, or to that bottle and bond limit. Where they start to see more youthful type of whiskeys and have to, educate the consumer that grain forward is not a bad thing. I like grain forward whiskey. I think people need to appreciate the grain. You have people like Alan Bishop or, the people at Frey Ranch that are talking about grain all the time and respecting the grain and doing that. So there is a movement towards it. It's small scale now. I hope it becomes larger. And you talked about blue corn, Balcones and some of these other brands that have done that. It's out there. It just, is it widely adopted yet, or will people appreciate or come to appreciate it? That's the thing you always have to worry about, right?
Yeah. And I really hope that the consumer does. And I really hope that distilleries and great distillers continue to do that. And I would change that a little bit. I would say maybe not maybe expand it a little bit more and say, as opposed to grain forward, let's say distillate forward.
Mm.
And by distillate forward, I mean not just the grain in that mash, but also the wonderful ester profiles that the yeast can produce in the fermentation. Everything, leading pre-barrel, right?
Yeah.
I think distillate forward whiskeys are beautiful. Distillate forward spirits in general are beautiful. And a lot of times when you age the hell out of it, you kind of miss something. I'm kind of a purist when it comes to I like distillate forward spirits, but you know what that means? You got to make a great distillate, right? You have to make it great. You have to focus on the fermentation, the health of the fermentation. Make sure that your total acidity is not running out of control, and just getting to the right level, not way too high. But there's a lot around that, and that's where you get into the biochemistry side of it, which I love.
Yeah, I think that's the part. I was talking to my buddy who worked at Four Roses and now on at Michter's, and he's a biochemistry person too. And I'm just like, man, you start talking about fermentation and yeast strains, and I'm sure it can get really nerdy really quick talking about yeast and the fermentation process, because that's where the magic happens though, right? That's where everything is turning over and becoming it. And I think the average consumer needs to hear that conversation more often, because yes, it is nerdy, but it's really the chemical makeup of what you're drinking. And once you understand that, I feel like you have more appreciation for what you're drinking than not.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the big point that really drew me to both brewing and distilling sciences in the beginning, is that, you get to bring in all these wonderful sciences. You have the chemical engineering side of it, which is really the process side of it. You have the micro bio and biochem part of it, which is really the living side of it, right? It's that it's that fermentation and just as important, that bacterial side of what we do in the fermentation. So we can geek out for many hours on that side right there alone.
Yeah.
But that is what I hope people take away from these types of talks and from their experience with whiskeys, is that it's a really complex topic, and you're going to get out as much as you want to put into it as far as listening, learning, and reading. It's there's a lot to it, and I hope that people kind of really keep on diving in further and further.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the next steps is. The average consumer just knows what they like and they go and pick it up. They don't understand the process. And I think once people understand the process, then they'll appreciate it even more. And the appreciation for craft will grow even further, because they'll understand hey, this person had to go through X and Y to, bring this to market. And it's not like we talked about, it's not an easy process. It's 3, 4, 5 years before you know what's going on. The R&D process is a long period of time. So there's a lot of opportunity for failure for these people too, that are producing whiskey. And so I think that's really one of the most interesting parts of it all. To close us out for today, High West is always kind of like I mentioned, kind of on that forefront, what do you see is that, what should people expect coming out of High West in the next, can you tease anything for us over the next 6 months? Is there something that's coming that people need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah. So probably a couple things to mention here. Obviously, we have the High Country single malt coming out in December again. We have limited stock, so we can only grow it so fast, but of course it will be national release again. And we hope to grow it quite a bit more in the years to come. And so we're pretty excited about that. Samples are coming out as we speak out of the inventory right now, so we can get to the laboratory and start blending that up. So that's coming. I mentioned earlier when you and I were talking, I don't know if we were really recording at that point in time or not yet, but we got something that we're pushing hard to try to get out in October. It's a long awaited release that I can't really say too much about it right now, because we're not even sure if we can get it out by October. We have kind of a fallback date to get it out, but we're trying for October, mid-October. But just keep your eyes to the Whiskey Club and sign up for the Whiskey Club if you're not on there, so you can see what we might be up to in that regard. Beyond that, we kind of talked about it a little bit. Grain types, we're close to. I'd say we're probably only about 2 years away max from introducing our own pot still bourbon into High West bourbon. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
We're getting samples out of the inventory on that right now. We started producing bourbon later in the High West history than rye. We focused on rye big time in the beginning. So our bourbon stocks are younger. So that's why it took longer to get that going. But that's going to be a very focused blending process, because that's what we love to do, right? It's that combination of column still and pot still. So we're super excited about that. So there's a few things that we're working on right now.
And will Midwinters, return again for 2022?
it will return again. Midwinters might have a buddy in October that drops with them. And that's what we're trying to work on to get that out in October. And so we'll see if that happens. If not, we'll look towards the first quarter next year. But there's just a lot of loopholes to jump through on that right now. But yeah, Midwinters will definitely be coming back. We're finalizing that blend right now, and as always, it's looking great.
Yeah, I'm excited. That's one of the releases that I look forward to every year, is trying to get my hands on that one. And if you're looking for a way to really get that opportunity, go over to High West, sign up for the High West Whiskey Club. And then if you're in one of the eligible states, sign up for the Saloon Society if there are spots open, for your state or region, because that's how I've gotten the opportunity to get these whiskeys and try them. If you're a fan of High West, like I am, it's a great way to see what's going on and try the great things that the team out there in Park City and Wanship are putting together, because it's only getting better. It's gotten better each year from my point of view. And I'm really excited to, see what the future holds.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll add on to that. I'm not sure if we have, like you mentioned, the Saloon Society might be closed for right now because it's still kind of in trial phase. But I do hope we open up more spots if we haven't already. On the Whiskey Club, the great thing about the Whiskey Club is that we have a really phenomenal food and beverage program and a bar out here. We actually have 3 locations, I guess, across our hospitality, food and beverage. And so when you're on the Whiskey Club, you get first notice on parties, release events. This is the first year in 3 years now, because of COVID, we're bringing the Midwinter Nights Dram party back. And so it's like our biggest bash of the year. But just for future, parties and everything, that's where you get first notice on that. So you can get first notice on tickets, get your tickets and come out here for a cool vacation and check out the distillery in its finest. Yeah.
And that's on the list to come back. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was the 3-day Rendezvous hiking trail for next year. They already sent out information to apply for that. That's something that I got to talk to the wife about, see if we can go out to that one, because I think that one looks pretty sweet. The Rendezvous Roundup, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. We had kind of the first trial run of that this year with backcountry.com and a bunch of influencers that it was like our first trial to see how to do it. And it was a great success. And so we definitely want to roll it out to the general public.
Yeah. So really excited for the future of High West. Be on the lookout. You can find out more at, Drink High West is their handle on Instagram, on all social medias, I believe. And, Brendon, thank you so much for joining the Bourbon Lens. We really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode. If you want to find out more information about High West, again, go to at Drink High West on their socials, or just highwest.com on your Google search, and it'll get you everywhere you need to go. And then if you want to find out more about Bourbon Lens, go over to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Bourbon Lens, or head over to patreon.com/Bourbon Lens for exclusive opportunities. We'd really appreciate it if you go to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, and give us a 5-star review if you're so inclined. And until next time, cheers.
Thanks very much.